It was supposed to be a night of celebration, a showcase of power, family, and legacy. But by the end of the evening, the golden chandeliers of the National Civic Hall would bear witness to something entirely different, a clash of truth versus privilege that no one saw coming. Because when Barron Trump and Ivanka tried to corner Jasmine Crockett, they thought they were walking into an easy win. They were wrong. The grand marble steps of the Civic Hall gleamed under the flashes of cameras. Reporters swarmed like bees around luxury cars as DC's most powerful gathered for the president's new Youth Leadership and Justice Reform Gala. Inside, the air shimmered with anticipation and ego. Barron arrived first, tall, confident, and clearly comfortable in the spotlight. Gone was the shy teenager America once knew. Tonight, he was composed, almost presidential. Moments later, Ivanka Trump appeared beside him, radiant in a champagne-colored gown. Her trademark poise and smile concealed the subtle tension already brewing beneath the surface. The siblings represented power, privilege, and the Trump dynasty's polished image. But across the crowded room stood a different kind of presence, one that didn't need pedigree to command attention. Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett. Dressed in deep royal blue, Jasmine moved through the room with quiet confidence. No entourage, no theaters, just calm energy that turned heads anyway. For Barron, tonight was an opportunity to showcase the family's next generation of leadership. For Ivanka, it was about control, ensuring everything stayed perfectly on script. And for Jasmine, it was about truth and the courage to speak it, no matter who was listening. A host's voice echoed through the massive hall. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our guests of honor, Barron Trump, Ivanka Trump, and Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett." Applause filled the room. Cameras clicked rapidly as the three exchanged polite smiles for the press. Ivanka, graceful as ever, extended her hand first. "Congresswoman Crockett," she said smoothly, "we've heard quite a bit about your passion for reform. I hope tonight you'll be diplomatic." Jasmine smiled lightly, meeting her gaze. "Don't worry," she replied. "I usually am, until the truth gets uncomfortable." Barron chuckled under his breath. "Well, we'll try not to make you too uncomfortable tonight." Jasmine tilted her head slightly. "Oh, I don't get uncomfortable. I make others uncomfortable." The laughter around them was polite, but strange. The tension was already visible. From that moment, the tone was set. This wasn't going to be a simple evening of speeches and champagne. This was going to be a showdown, one wrapped in silk and smiles. As guests took their seats, the orchestra faded. The spotlight moved toward the stage. Barron Trump was first to speak. "Leadership," he began, "isn't just about policy or politics. It's about legacy, about what we pass down to the next generation." His voice was deep, confident, almost rehearsed to perfection. He spoke of youth programs, entrepreneurship, and building on the foundation laid by great leaders before us. Ivanka watched proudly from her table, nodding at key lines she had clearly helped him craft. The audience applauded warmly. Barron smiled, satisfied. Then it was Jasmine's turn. She approached the podium calmly, her blue gown glinting under the stage light. "Legacy," she began softly, "isn't inherited. It's earned through truth, not titles." The audience shifted. Some leaned forward. "We talk about legacy like it's a family heirloom," she continued, "passed from one generation to the next. But real legacy comes from struggle, from understanding those who never had a seat at the table." Her words cut through the air like glass. Ivanka's smile faltered slightly. Barron's jaw tightened. "And if we're honest," Jasmine added, "too many leaders are still building tables where only certain people are invited to sit." The applause that followed wasn't polite, it was powerful. In that moment, Jasmine Crockett didn't just give a speech, she made a statement. And Barron Trump, watching from the front row, felt it like a direct challenge. He leaned over to Ivanka, whispering under the applause, "She's calling us out." Ivanka's eyes never left Jasmine. "Then we'll remind her whose house she's in." After the speeches, the guests mingled again. The air buzzed with conversation. Barron moved through the crowd with charm, shaking hands, accepting compliments. But his eyes kept flicking toward Jasmine, who was now speaking with several congressmen and journalists, commanding the conversation with quiet authority. He leaned closer to Ivanka. "She's good, too good." "Don't worry," Ivanka murmured. "I have an idea. We'll see how calm she stays when the tables turn." Barron grinned. He trusted her instincts, and she had never been one to lose control. But what Ivanka didn't realize was that Jasmine wasn't there to play games. She wasn't afraid of confrontation. She was confrontation, wrapped in composure. Later, as the orchestra played softly, Ivanka approached Jasmine with a glass of champagne and a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Congresswoman, wonderful speech earlier," Ivanka said sweetly. "You've got quite the gift with words. It almost sounds rehearsed." Jasmine smiled back. "So I've been told, especially by people who prefer silence." Ivanka's expression hardened slightly. "You talk a lot about truth and leadership, but isn't leadership also about knowing when to respect legacy?" "Legacy is only respectable when it's earned," Jasmine replied evenly. At that moment, Barron joined in, his tone smooth but sharp. "Maybe one day you'll understand what it means to carry a family name with history behind it." Jasmine turned to face him directly. "Oh, I understand history," she said. "I just don't let it control me." The words were calm, but they hit like thunder. For the first time that evening, Barron didn't have a comeback. Ivanka forced a laugh, trying to ease the tension. "Well," she said softly, "let's hope the rest of tonight goes more smoothly." Jasmine raised her glass slightly. "That depends on how honest the next part gets." And with that, part one came to an uneasy close. What began as polite diplomacy was turning into a quiet battlefield. But the real confrontation, the one that would shake the room, was still coming. Because Jasmine Crockett wasn't done speaking truth. And Barron and Ivanka had no idea what she was about to say next. The night was only halfway through, but the atmosphere inside the National Civic Hall had already shifted. The polished smiles were still there, the laughter still floated through the air, but underneath it all, something was brewing. Barron Trump moved through the crowd with practiced ease, shaking hands, giving compliments, pretending nothing was off. But his mind wasn't on the speeches anymore. It was on Jasmine Crockett. He replayed her words in his head, that calm tone that somehow carried more weight than any shout ever could. She hadn't raised her voice, hadn't insulted anyone, yet she made the room feel smaller, tighter, as if the truth itself had taken up space no one could ignore. Ivanka noticed it too. She watched her brother carefully, reading every flicker of his expression. She had always been the strategist, polished, composed, and dangerously calculated. And she wasn't about to let anyone, not even Jasmine Crockett, steal their spotlight. A plan was already forming in her mind, a subtle one. She didn't need a microphone or a confrontation to make a point. She just needed the right moment. The guests began to settle back into their seats as the second half of the event resumed. Barron and Ivanka exchanged a glance. She leaned closer to him and whispered, "Let's see how perfect she really is when we flip the script." Barron smirked slightly, though something about Jasmine's calm presence still unsettled him. He wasn't used to being challenged, especially not publicly, and definitely not by someone who never broke her composure. The lights dimmed, and the host walked onto the stage again. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, "please welcome back our speakers for the final discussion of the night on leadership, legacy, and accountability." The applause rolled like a soft wave across the room. Jasmine stepped up first, taking her seat at the long table on stage. Barron and Ivanka joined moments later, sitting to her left. For a moment, everything looked calm, but under the surface, the tension was sharp enough to cut glass. The moderator began with the first question, something about the future of youth leadership. Barron leaned into the microphone. "Leadership," he said smoothly, "isn't about who shouts the loudest, it's about action, and I think we've seen a lot of talk lately, but not much progress." The words were careful, deliberate, a shot disguised as a statement. A few people in the crowd understood exactly who he was talking about. Jasmine, however, didn't flinch. She simply turned toward him and smiled. "I agree," she said calmly. "Leadership isn't about talk, it's about truth, and action without truth is just performance." A soft murmur moved through the audience. Ivanka folded her hands neatly on the table and leaned toward her microphone. "Truth is important," she said with her signature grace, "but so is respect, especially for the people who've built the path we walk on." Jasmine nodded slowly. "Respect, yes, but not blind obedience. The path should stay open for those who were never allowed to walk it." That line landed like a spark in dry air. The room went silent. Ivanka's smile froze. Barron shifted in his chair. The host tried to move on to the next question, but Jasmine wasn't done. She turned slightly, her tone still calm. "We talk about legacy and family and leadership as if they're the same thing," she said. "But legacy without accountability is just inheritance, and inheritance doesn't make you a leader, it makes you lucky." A few people clapped, others held their breath. Barron looked visibly irritated now. He leaned toward the microphone, his voice colder. "Some of us don't need to prove ourselves through confrontation," he said. "We believe in dignity, not drama." Jasmine smiled again, unbothered. "Dignity is good," she replied softly, "but silence in the face of hypocrisy isn't dignity. It's fear dressed up in manners." Gasps rippled through the room. Barron tried to hold his expression, but his hand clenched slightly against the table. Ivanka reached over and touched his arm under the table, a quiet signal to stay calm. But her eyes never left Jasmine's. For a long moment, neither woman spoke. The air between them was electric, alive with unspoken challenge. Jasmine finally leaned forward, her voice steady. "I think we all have a responsibility to be honest, even when it's uncomfortable, especially when it's uncomfortable." The moderator tried to lighten the tension with a joke, but the audience wasn't laughing. Everyone could feel it. This wasn't just a debate about leadership anymore. It was personal. Barron forced a polite smile. "Well," he said, "some people just enjoy being the loudest voice in the room. It gets attention, after all." Jasmine looked at him and replied instantly. "And some people mistake silence for strength, when it's really just privilege in disguise." The room went dead silent again. Ivanka's expression hardened. She leaned forward, her voice soft but cutting. "You seem to have a lot of opinions, Congresswoman. Maybe you should remember that the only reason you're on this stage tonight is because of the very system you criticize." That line drew a collective gasp. Barron looked proud of his sister's jab. But Jasmine didn't blink. She stared straight ahead and spoke quietly, almost tenderly. "You're right. The system did put me here tonight, and I intend to make sure that next time it doesn't decide who gets to speak or who gets silenced." A long silence followed. Jasmine didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Her calmness was the confrontation. For the first time, Barron and Ivanka didn't seem sure how to respond. The polished control they were known for was cracking, just slightly, but enough for everyone to notice. The host quickly ended the segment, thanking the speakers and inviting the audience for refreshments. But the damage was done. As they stepped off the stage, the crowd erupted into whispers. Some called Jasmine bold, others called her reckless. But one thing was certain, she had shifted the balance of power in that room. Barron's jaw was tight as he walked past her. Ivanka's face remained composed, but her eyes burned with quiet fury. Jasmine, meanwhile, didn't look back. She just walked toward the back of the hall, shoulders straight, every step quiet but deliberate. She didn't need to win the room. She had already won the moment. But the night wasn't over, not even close. Because Barron and Ivanka weren't the type to let something like that go unanswered. And what happened next would turn a simple gala into a public reckoning. The crowd was still buzzing from what had just happened on stage. Every corner of the ballroom seemed alive with murmurs, glances, and speculation. Some guests were pretending to chat about the food, but everyone knew the real story of the night was unfolding quietly between Jasmine Crockett and the Trump siblings. Jasmine moved through the hall with a calm grace, greeting people as if nothing had happened. She didn't gloat, she didn't smile too wide, but behind that calm, she knew the energy of the room had shifted. The power dynamic that once tilted toward privilege now leaned toward truth. At the far end of the hall, Barron stood beside Ivanka, their expressions tight and unreadable. Ivanka was whispering to him, her voice low but sharp. "She made us look small out there," she said. "We can't just walk away from this." Barron hesitated. "Maybe we should let it go," he muttered. "It'll blow over." But Ivanka shook her head. "No, not tonight. She wanted attention. Let's give her all the attention she can handle." A glint of something cold passed through her eyes. She turned, her heels clicking against the marble floor as she made her way toward Jasmine. Barron followed close behind. Jasmine was standing near one of the tall glass windows overlooking the city, deep in conversation with a senator. When she turned and saw them approaching, her expression didn't change. Ivanka offered a polished smile. "Congresswoman," she said softly, "we didn't get to finish our little discussion on stage." Jasmine's tone was smooth, steady. "That's because the truth doesn't need repetition, Miss Trump. It speaks once and lingers." Barron gave a short laugh. "Is that what you call it? Truth? Because from where I stood, it looked like you were trying to embarrass us." Jasmine turned fully toward him. "If the truth embarrasses you, Barron, maybe it's not me you're upset with." A few nearby guests froze mid-conversation. The tension was thick enough to draw attention without a single raised voice. Ivanka stepped closer, her tone still composed but sharper now. "You have a lot of nerve, Congresswoman. You walk into our event, our father's program, and turn it into a stage for your speeches." "This isn't your event," Jasmine replied quietly. "It's a national program, and the people it's supposed to help don't carry your last name." The room went still again. Barron's voice rose slightly, his control slipping. "You know what? You talk about equality, but you act like you're above everyone else here." Jasmine met his gaze. "I don't think I'm above anyone. I just refuse to bow." That line hit him like a slap made of silk. Ivanka tried to interrupt, but Jasmine kept speaking, her tone steady, her eyes locked on both of them. "You talk about legacy and leadership, but leadership isn't about keeping the world polished for your reflection. It's about being brave enough to face the cracks in the mirror." A low murmur ran through the crowd. People were pretending not to listen, but every ear was tuned in. Ivanka's smile faltered for the first time that night. "Are you accusing us of something, Congresswoman?" Jasmine took a slow breath. "No accusation, just observation." She paused, her next words deliberate. "You both talk about leadership, but you confuse it with image. You protect the family name like it's the nation's flag. But the flag doesn't belong to one family. It belongs to the people." The silence that followed was electric. Even the music from the orchestra seemed to fade. Barron tried to respond, but the words wouldn't come. His composure cracked, just slightly, but enough to reveal the frustration beneath the polish. Ivanka looked around and realized everyone was watching. Jasmine could have stopped there. She had already made her point. But instead, she took one step closer, her voice softer now, almost compassionate. "You both grew up in rooms like this," she said. "Rooms where applause is easy and truth feels optional. But someday, you'll step outside these walls, and the world won't clap for your last name. It'll challenge you to be more than it." Ivanka swallowed hard, trying to keep her posture. "You think you're better than us?" Jasmine shook her head. "No, I think I've just stopped pretending." There was nothing dramatic about the way she said it. No raised voice, no grand gesture. But those words carried the kind of quiet power that could move mountains. For a long, breathless moment, no one spoke. Barron finally looked at her and said, almost under his breath, "You don't know what it's like to have every eye on you, every word twisted." Jasmine looked at him, and this time her tone softened just enough to reach him. "I do. I just never had the luxury of hiding behind silence." The words landed heavier than either of them expected. Ivanka turned abruptly, grabbing her clutch from the table. "We're leaving," she said firmly. Barron hesitated, glancing once more at Jasmine, a strange mix of defiance and understanding flickering in his eyes, before following his sister toward the exit. The crowd slowly began to murmur again, the spell broken but the tension still hanging like smoke in the air. Jasmine stood quietly, letting the moment breathe. She didn't chase them, she didn't celebrate. She simply stood by the window again, watching their car pull away through the glass. Her assistant approached quietly. "You just started a storm, Congresswoman." Jasmine smiled faintly. "No," she said, "I just stopped pretending there wasn't one." Outside, the flashes of cameras lit the dark street as the Trump car disappeared into the night. Inside, Jasmine turned away from the window, the reflection of city lights flickering across her face. She had come to speak about justice, and she had. But what she'd done was something deeper. She'd reminded everyone in that room that truth doesn't need a crown to be powerful. It just needs courage. As the last guests began to leave, a quiet respect filled the air around her. Even those who disagreed with her couldn't deny what they'd just witnessed. She hadn't shouted, she hadn't fought, she simply told the truth and let it stand on its own. And that, more than anything, was what made her untouchable. The gala lights dimmed one by one, leaving only the glow of the city beyond the glass. Jasmine took one last look over her shoulder, her voice calm and steady as she whispered to herself, "Leadership isn't inherited, it's proven." The doors closed behind her as she walked into the night, leaving silence, awe, and truth in her wake.